Unnecessary intro song to totally waste your time. One of the most horrifying things of watching Charlie Kirk be brutally murdered is I thought that could have been me. You know? That could have been me. Just here in my city, saying what I want, saying what I think, and immediately after it, saying what I want, saying what I think, and having so-called friends, people that I know, issue me veiled threats. People in San Francisco, you're annoying them. We know where you live. Just saying. That's a thinly veiled threat. Another person sent some graffiti that he did. It said, Charlie Kirked the bucket. Ha ha. These people are tacitly endorsing my murder. That's what they're saying. I deserve to die. Because I say the same things Charlie Kirk says. He deserved to die. You deserve to die. That could have been me. It's a horrible thought, Not that I'm afraid of dying, I don't want to die. I love life. I think the miracle of existence is the whole reason why I say things. The whole reason why I say the things that I do is because the miracle of being alive is so unfathomable. The miracle of being born in a body with thoughts and minds and the ability to move around is an unfathomable improbability. Mathematically speaking, it's just like one breath, every breath is a miracle. That's not hyperbole. It's literally true. It's insane. I got a couple of flies buzzing around the room right now. Miracles. They're flying. Everywhere you point your eyes is a miracle. And these people laughing at the death of the murder of somebody who was only pushing that message. These people don't see the miracle around. They think life is a tragedy, some sort of mathematical who cares. It's not a miracle, it's just, But you know what's even worse? What's even worse, or what's interesting, or I don't know, worse, better, what's more important? And the way that I've been thinking is that, it could have been me. It could have been me who was murdered. And I know that they're coming for me, and I'm not just trying to be some paranoid guy. I'm not saying somebody's outside my window waiting to kill me, or that anybody in San Francisco actually wants to kill me. I'm a low-value target. I've taken myself out of the game, basically. I did that when I had my moment. I didn't like it. I pulled back. I quit. I stopped doing the things that I was doing that was bringing me attention because I didn't like it. I didn't like who was coming around me. So I pulled back. So I'm not trying to say I'm some high-value target, but it doesn't matter. It's not me. It's the we. It's the people who believe in the miracle. Scratch that. It's the people who know and acknowledge the miracle. Not believe, but know. I know existence is a miracle because I'm living it every second of my life. I know that something created this. I don't know the name. I don't know what they look like, or if it's a they or whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't need to shrink it. It's enormous. It's unfathomable. It demands humility. It doesn't ask you to be humble. It just is a fact that you must be humble in the presence, because your ability to know everything, it's too vast. It's too vast. It's too miraculous. And that humility that's just there. All you have to do is acknowledge it. You don't need to find humility. Just look. Look at how miraculous everything is. But those who know that and acknowledge reality are the targets. They want those people to die and suffer. And they laugh with glee, with evil glee. We see that now. I've spent my life resisting the term evil. I use it a lot now since 2020. Before that, I resisted it because it sounded corny. It sounded corny. Don't say evil. What are you, some religious person? You sound like my mom. Anyway, they want us dead. Okay? They will dance on our graves. People that I know in San Francisco, I now know, have been and are secretly hoping for my death because I hold opinions that they don't like. You know? But I'm getting to something else. That's dark. That is dark. That is dark. That is dark. Charlie Kirk, it could have been me. He could have been me. That's dark. But you know what's darker? Tyler Robinson could have been me. Okay? Here's a kid that was born into a wonderful piece of land, Utah, with a culture that has problems, but is ultimately underneath everything. There's a lot of weird doctrines in Mormonism, and people are complicated. So, if people are involved, it's going to be messy. But underneath Mormonism is a desire to do good in the world, to treat people fairly, to be loving and kind. Born into a family he was born into a nice little family in beautiful, around St. George. Handsome kid, handsome family. And somewhere along the line, somebody, a teacher, somebody online, an algorithm, convinced him that he was evil because he's white, male, and Christian. That could have been me. I don't think I would have ever killed anybody. But let's not be so dramatic. Let's not say that's the thing. But in many ways, Tyler Robinson was me. I ended up turning my back on my family and my friends and my culture, and my neighborhood, and I hightailed it out of Utah and came to San Francisco, a wonderful piece of land with amazing weather, beautiful trees, a wonderful beach, lovely hills, fantastic architecture, and a lot of poisoned, sick Tyler Robinsons. You know? And it's a little bit different. Let me not get sidetracked. I want to go, that's the thing with this shooting is every single bit. If I wanted to be a delusional freak and say, God designed this moment specifically for you, Merkley, that sounds crazy. But if I mapped it out, that was my college. My band played on that quad. I sat in the classroom below where the shooter shot the guy. I've walked those things. My first serious girlfriend lived 500 yards from where that happened. The first time I dealt with the guilt of the sin of maybe fornication was right there, right, instrumental, the big struggle I had, one of the first struggles I had with, do I join the Mormons and, do I get married and have kids and have a family? The struggle, the mental struggle, was right there. My church court, my wedding, my divorce, the first time I ever did the thing that people do to create children and successfully created a child was right there, just down the road. I could I could smell the air. The gun that was used, a 30-06, was my stepdad's gun. I killed a deer with my 30-30. The first deer I ever shot, 14 years old, I shot a deer with my 30-30. It was about the same distance, and the trajectory was about the same. I was on a hill. The deer was lower than me, about 100 yards away. And I squared up, and one shot, and it looked like what I saw with Charlie. That's the first thing I thought. The first thing I thought when I saw that video. It was, the horror, but also, that's a deer rifle. I immediately thought of that deer. Like every bit of it triangulates to my, I promoted shows at that school, I ate lunch right there in that commons area that's right behind where Charlie was killed. Those faces in the crowd, those are my people, literally people that overlap with my genetics. Man, it's just, so when people are, people are going on, Israel did it. Okay, yeah, they did. But through the poisoning of the mind. Okay? Look what happened, okay? When you're told, when you're brought up, you go to school. This is the big mistake. Our parents, bless their hearts, shirked their duty and sent us off to schools. They assumed that the teachers had our best interests at heart. And some of our teachers did have our best interests, but where did they get the books? They had a curriculum. Your favorite teacher had to follow a curriculum. It's not like you could go to school and your teacher, your nice little teacher, could just willy-nilly decide what they want to teach. No, they have a lesson plan. They have a curriculum. Curriculum. Listen to that word. It sounds evil, for crying out loud. Curriculum. So these books that we opened, we were babies, and they were telling us things that we didn't have any need to know. Slavery, Holocaust, American Revolution, slavery, white people. You're bad. White people colonize white people, what they did to Indians, over and over. And I just remember constantly thinking, oh, I'm not like one of them. I'm not one of them. How could they do that? How could those white people do that to the Jews? How could those white people do that to the Indians? How could those white people do that to black people, to slaveries? You know? Is it a surprise when a good little white kid decides to say, I'm not like that? I'm not like that at all. I'll show you. And a white kid who never met any black kids, didn't have any black friends, starts a ska band, is in a ska band, and all the lyrics about racism. No horse in the game, no horse in the race. You know, a little white kid decides that, you know, I'm not like the Nazis. Starts making art, starts trying to hang around with in academia and intellectualism and the stuff that the Jews are making, and starts making, you know, excuses for, oh, the Jews are great, blah, 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 Israel. I'm not like that. How dare they, this is my best Greta Thunberg, how dare they develop a curriculum that is designed to implant ideas into young white children's brains, Christian children's brains, that they are inherently evil. That's the message. Let's be clear. They were teaching us, they didn't teach us how at one point, I assumed that they were teaching all the great things that America did. Why don't I remember that? Why don't I remember that? Why are the lessons that I remember are the manipulative ones where they were teaching them two events, okay? This happened twice. I remember in second grade, Misty Young on the avenues, okay? She, I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again, God damn it. We all sat down in our chairs. She handed out math assignments to all the boys. Just the boys, you know? And she said, okay, boys, you're going to do the math assignment. Girls, we go to the back of the room. And she had one of those air poppers, popcorn things. They're brand new with the yellow top. She turned it on. The smell of popcorn started filling the room. The girls were sitting in a circle, eating popcorn in the bowl. You know, the teacher was trying to teach us about slavery. And I was filled with rage. I looked to my left, looked to my right, looked at the other boys doing the assignment, and I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? I didn't swear. I was a nice little Mormon kid, you know? Probably not even 4 feet tall at the time, second grade. How tall? I was a baby. And this woman was trying to teach me this lesson, you know? And it was aimed at me. Why did she pick the boys? You know? Anyway, I went back. My head filled with so much rage, I went back to the back of the room, marched into their little circle, grabbed the bowl of popcorn, sat down and started munching it like, what are you going to do, lady? I don't even remember what happened after that. I nearly passed out from adrenaline. And then again, in Mr. Wallentyne in West Jordan Middle School, you know, tried to do a slavery thing, handed us a piece of string, got to tie knots. You got to tie knots in these strings, and they got to be, he had a yardstick, and the knots had to be an eighth of an inch apart. And he just tied him, and he was walking around the room like a slave master and smashing he smacked his yardstick down on my desk. It's got to be an eighth of an inch, you know. He was trying to teach us about slavery. But his lesson was, you are somehow, do you see how it feels? That's what he's trying to do. Do you see how it feels? As if he's trying to teach me what I had done to a slave. That was the purpose. You know? reparations. He was administering reparations. I hadn't done anything. I was a child. And I thought, oh, this is a poignant lesson. And I was angry. With his lesson. Why are you doing that? I haven't done anything. I started a fuss. I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. I was defiant. And I could see in his face that he didn't know what to do with me. Almost like he was scared that he had done something wrong. I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not a slave. You can't treat me like a slave to teach me a lesson. I'm not tying these knots. No. What are you going to do? But that's what it was. That's what school was. Constantly telling young white Christians that they're guilty of something. And this is back, I'm 58 years old. And then so it was there, it was already there. This sickening ideology. But we let it go, and another generation passes by, and then there's the millennials. And they get a much heavier dose of that. And then along comes the pride flag, which is the most disgusting flag you could ever wave in a child's face. It's obviously designed to appeal to them. The bright colors. But what does that flag mean? It means you can put your wiener wherever you want. It's a flag about genitals. It's a flag of confusion. It's a flag of perversion, right? Suddenly that fills the classrooms and conversations. I remember even thinking in sex ed, like, why are we talking about this? Why is this woman at the front of the room talking to me about my dick? To confuse, That system was meant to combat the system, maybe of church or whatever. And I'm not trying to make excuses for churches that unnecessarily make people feel undue shame without a way to handle that shame and manage it. It is wrong to make somebody feel shame for simply having human urges, But I don't want to get sidetracked because we're talking about what the state has done, the brainwashing. So now you go to Gen Z, and they've got a full-blown diet because millennials, who is brainwashed, it's a series of brainwashing. You get the Gen Zs, you brainwash them, or Gen X, to brainwash them to a certain point, and they become believers, and then they pass that on to millennials, and they're more radicalized. They more internalize that self-hatred. And then it gets passed on to Gen Z. By this time, it's full-blown crazy. The slippery slope of gay marriage has come and gone, and now we're drag queen story hour, where perverts are literally sitting with their legs open, talking to kids and making them confused, and telling them the lesson is, you're cis white male. That's the most evil thing you can be. You cis, white, privileged male Christian. And you've got two young boys. You got Lance Twiggs, a kid from Pleasant Grove, and you got Tyler Robinson, a young Mormon boy living in southern Utah. And we think, oh, but not my school. Curriculum. The poison is injected through the curriculum. So even if you have good teachers, the curriculum is being injected into their minds. The books. It's okay if you're older if an older person comes and talks to you about your genitals. Talk to them about it. Some boys are boys, some boys are girls, some girls are, but all cis white men are evil. When you teach a child that being cis, they made up a word, a regular white man, straight white man. When you teach him that that is evil, that there isn't anything more evil than being of course the first off-ramp is, I'm trans. I don't want to be evil. I don't want people to think I'm evil. I'm not evil. I'm going to prove it to you by chopping off my dick. You know? Humanity is ruining the world. I'm not human. I'm a furry. I'm a tiger. I know I'm being repetitive, but this is real. This is what happened to Tyler Robinson. It happened to me. I stood up and said, not me, not me, not me, over and over again. You know, I'm not that way. I didn't need to be defensive. I shouldn't have been. I should have never been accused. I should have never been accused. I was accused. Mr. Young accused me. Mr. Wallentyne accused me. All my teachers accused me. The curriculum accused me. And now we get to algorithms. Now we get to social media. Thank goodness I didn't have it back then. You know, because look what I did. Look what I did. I rebelled. Not me. I'm going to move to San Francisco, the gayest town in the whole world. You know, I want to talk about that because my visceral reaction to, you know, because when you're a kid, you go around, you call each other fag. Oh, don't be such a fag, you know, whatever. And it's not mean-spirited. It's not whatever. It's just like, it's natural. Every culture is like that. The men emasculate the other men for whatever, to help form them into men and take care of things. To not be fags, not be women. Women are good at being women. Let the women be women. Men, maybe be men. Maybe don't be a fag. Learn how to protect mothers, sisters, daughters, grandmothers. You know, don't be a fag. Nothing evil about that. It's just how kids are. Oh, but you're evil. Remember? Your natural state is evil. So I remember there's this kid named Roger Reeves in drama class. And, well, I mean, there was a kid, Jason, in fourth grade. The first time I ever thought about really like, not gay, but there was this kid that you couldn't tell if he was a girl or a boy, right? Super, super feminine, hung out with the girls. And it was just like, quite frankly, it was kind of repulsive. It was like, oh, what the fuck is going on here? You know, he's a nice kid. He's human. I never made fun of him, but my thought was, ew, what? You know, confusion. Like, okay, I don't want to talk. I don't want to be around the guy. You know, at that age, you're not even necessarily wanting to be around girls. Girls were a little creepy when you were a kid. You know, it's like, oh, they're girls. Ew. You know, but a boy that was like a girl, it was like, okay. But, you know, as a good kid, you go, okay, but don't be mean. I was taught to not be mean. I wasn't mean, you know? And when I see other people being mean to him, I'd be like, yeah, don't do that. You know, don't be mean. I don't like bullies. But anyway, it was complicated watching Jason flitting around like a little girl, you know? And then I met my best friend in like 6th grade. We sat next to each other, and what was his name? I can't remember his name of his class. But we became best friends. I went to his house, and his little brother, 2 years old, also this feminine kind of a thing. I thought, oh, well, shit, you got a sissy little brother, a girly little brother. Nobody was mean to him. We weren't mean to him. He grew up to be gay. We all expected it. It would have been weird had he not. You know, there's a certain type. Like, nobody wanted to see Jason pretending to be a boyfriend to somebody, a woman. It would have been weird, you know? Anyway, but I'm skipping over. And then junior high, there was this one kid named Roger, and he was, I don't know what, but he was the first type of, he was maybe the first kind of, it was my first experience being partly a bully to somebody, you know? Because Roger was creepy looking. He had, he looked like Garrison Keillor, but really skinny. And he almost looked like his jaw was shaped in a way that old people with no teeth have. In other words, the distance was, it was too short. Like, I don't know if you ever made those apple, you carve a face out of an apple and then you let it dry and it shrinks and it looks like a shrunken head and an old person, you know. He had that kind of face. But he, I told him, I said, stop. Why do you keep looking at me? You know, quit looking at me. You know, it was in drama class, and which is already gay enough, you know. But he kept looking at me, and I said, knock it off, you faggot, you know. And he winked and blew a kiss at me. And this disrespect just really fucking annoyed me. So I tried to pick a fight with him. Going back into the school, the drama class was in a pod. I said, what the fuck, faggot? You want to fight? You know, that kind of thing. And we're talking about a kid. I'm not a big kid. I was never a big kid. I was skinny as fuck. So it's kind of comical that I was even picking a fight with anybody. You know, but he picked up his books and he threw them at me and they missed me and they slid across the floor and I stepped on his papers and I said, don't fucking act like that, you know? But I felt bad about it, okay? I felt bad about it later. And then along comes high school and new wave. And I like the new wave music. You got to remember, I had stepbrothers that were all into rock and roll, and they were tough, and I had to rebel against them. So new wave comes along, and breakdancing comes along, and I'm like, that's for me. I like that. It's not like this. Who knows what made me want to not be like my neighbors, but now that I look at it, it's just like the curriculum. The curriculum. You know? White people are bad. White Christians are bad. And with this new dose of effeminate new wave music that's being pumped around, you know, it's not like we had lots of choices back then. You had either pick the rock station or you pick the alternative station. I picked the alternative, you know, rebel. But what was it really? Just effeminate, you know, and lots of message that masculinity is bad. You know, so I was rebelling. You know, you tell me I'm evil, I'm going to prove to you I'm not. It's like reverse psychology. It's a mind fuck. You know, so there I am, being at every step. I'm just going. You don't know it at the time. I wouldn't have told you, but what we're really doing is resisting the label of being evil. You know. Oh, you say being white is bad. Well, I'm going to start a ska band and be anti-racism. You know, I'm going to make sure that maybe I'm going to listen to more black artists than normal. You know, maybe I'm going to pick. You know, I'm not saying that this is conscious or anything, but this direction, like all of a sudden you're identifying with things that aren't white. You know, that shouldn't be a surprise if you tell somebody, well, white is evil, then, okay, well, guess what? I'm going to prove I'm not evil, and I'm going to hang out with all the non-whites, you know, who are fine people and all that other shit too, you know. But it's this pressure, this unnatural pressure. Your natural instincts are there. My natural instinct was to go, Roger, you're fucking disgusting. You know? Because he was disgusting. I'm sorry. He was. I didn't invent that. Nobody taught me to think Roger was disgusting. Nobody needs to teach me that shit is disgusting either. You know? It's just like... But that's the programming. The curriculum is your natural way of being is evil. You were born evil. Not a sinner. I'm fine with sinner. But you're born evil. But this happened to Tyler, and this happened to Lance, and he made the ultimate move to prove not only am I not a cis white male, evil Christian, I'm going to show you. I'm going to murder a white male Christian. Will that prove to you that I'm not evil? You know? People aren't comprehending this. I see all these people analyzing and trying to say it's this and this, and they don't know the culture. They don't know. Like I said, I mean, this event almost seemed tailor-made for me. And I know it wasn't. I'm not delusional. But boy, it ticks every single box. I look at Tyler and I think there's no way Tyler ends up doing what he did without the curriculum, without the algorithm, sorry about the big words, without the manipulation. And who's behind those? Okay? Those are the evil people. But we need to stop it. We need to stop it. The teachers that are teaching it, the people that are laughing, they have all been poisoned. Okay? And we need to stop them, isolate them, take away any sphere of influence they have, rehab them if it's possible. And I think it might be, you know. But no, not willy-nilly. It doesn't, not just a sorry. No. They need to be fully deprogrammed. Okay? Fully. Until they're not laughing at the death of a person that has ideas that are actually good ideas. Conservative ideas, meaning they've been around for thousands of years. And being repetitive now. But yeah, that's the scary part. Not that Charlie could have been me, but that Tyler could have been me. You know, I don't even know. I don't think so. Because, you know, I was talking to an old girlfriend of mine. She sent me a random message, and she was another little story. It's like, this is a woman who, you know, I'm not trying to get the Mormon church or religions off the hook here. I'm not. We need to go back to church. I think so. I think it's very important to go back, meet people with common cause. I tried to find a church to go to on Sunday. I couldn't find any. The Mormon churches wouldn't return my phone calls. You can't find a number for them. I didn't really want to go to a Mormon church, but I did a chat GPT or like a Grok thing. I said, I want to find the most conservative church in San Francisco because I want to find people who aren't insane. Like I feel this real desire to find some people near. I need to know that that everybody's not gone insane. And it feels that way right now in San Francisco, where the death of Charlie Kirk has caused these people to come out and threaten me. It's been mostly silent and peaceful. Then he dies, and these people they're seizing the opportunity to try to make me feel unsafe. Like they were not only not horrified by it, but they were emboldened by it. So I felt this need to find people that weren't evil. Anyway, I didn't find one that I didn't find one that ticked the box. I didn't find one where I thought I can go there and not hear about how Charlie Kirk was evil. You know, and that was the thing. I certainly didn't want to go to a church to hear a sermon about how Charlie's words brought hate upon himself. You reap what you sow and blah, blah, blah. You know, I didn't need to hear from any cowardly, brainwashed types, you know. But I think people need to get back to church, you know. Churches need to get better. I think they hopefully maybe might. I don't know. But anyway, I was talking about how this girlfriend contacted me, and she said Her first response was that suicidal empathy. I feel for the kid who did it, and I'm kind of saying that now. Granted, this recording is, I'm not being sympathetic towards him, but I'm just saying it could have been me. And there's parts of it that were. I see a kid that was poisoned. I was a kid that was poisoned. I moved to San Francisco and spent 30 years hanging out with mostly gay people. What's that all about? I'm not gay, but I know that in my mind it's just like I'm going to prove that I'm a good person. I'm going to prove. It's like it's a savior complex thing. And a lot of that savior complex, it's not just being taught that Jesus was good. It's also being taught that being judgmental is bad, and seeing the judgmental people, and just, it's like proving. Like, I subjected myself to, I'm not saying that I didn't make good friends, and I'm not saying that the gay people I met and became friends with, some of them are still my favorite people, absolutely, for sure. And a lot of them had poisoned minds too. But I just know how often I was in that environment. And I know now, I can see it now, that a lot of it wasn't pure. I mean, it might have been purely intentioned. The intentions were pure. But there's a side, even when you have pure intentions, there's another side too, where it's selfish, and it's a virtue signal. And a lot of it was a virtue signal. Believe it or not, a lot of the rebellion against the Mormon Church, the usage of images that they don't like, was a virtue signal. I'm signaling that I'm not like them. But where does that come from? Again, it's unfair. It's unfair. I'm not like them. Well, really, what's wrong with them? And I wouldn't have said it. I've never been that far gone. I would have never said, well, they're white, they're Christian. I would have never said that. I would have never said it. Because I defended when people would say stuff like that and say, no, you're, fuck you. How dare you say it? I've not been one of these white guilt kind of guys. Like, my brain was intact enough to say, no, that's bullshit. But there's that underlying programming. That underlying program that, even though you're saying that it's not that, it is kind of that. It is kind of that. Because I didn't, Anyway, look, I know this. Like, when I would go with a friend, a bunch of friends, because you have gay friends here, and you go, okay, let's go to this bar, that bar, whatever. Okay, let's go to a gay bar. I'd be like, I know in my mind, I think, I don't have any interest in going to a gay bar. Absolutely none. And when you go to a gay bar, it's like, it's as gross as you think it is. But I would do it, and with a smile on my attitude. Why? Because it's a virtue signal. It's like, look at me, I can handle it. If you're really a man, you can handle being around it. You don't need to be repulsed by it, But the truth is I had no business being there. It was gross. It was gross. Men smell gross. Anyway, it's but you don't do that without the brainwashing, is what I'm saying. I was lucky. I didn't have the dark programming, not the darkest version. And I really honestly don't think there's any universe in which I turn into laying on the roof, shooting somebody because they say something I don't like. That timeline doesn't happen, but I can't say for sure because I didn't get his algorithms. That combination of rebelling against the church, which can be heavy-handed and make you feel shame for simple human urges, like watching porn, looking at a naked lady, masturbating, these simple things that every kid does, The Mormon church or people, they don't know how to handle that, so they push you away. And then this other group is telling you that it's evil. So it's easy to say, okay, yeah, my church is evil. There's this really delicate. Anyway, the point is I see this thing happening, and I understand the whole thing. All these people that are trying to put together all these different pieces, secret shooters planning, blah, 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 second shooter, signals with a cap. I'm going, you guys don't understand this story. I understand it. I understand every piece of this story. Okay? And if we go and try to make it into something else, we don't address it. And we have to address it. I was telling a friend yesterday, well, what if it is Bibi Netanyahu and Mossad, and you find a M16 or you find whatever? Let's say you can prove it directly, and then what do? We assassinate Bibi Netanyahu? No. Somebody else fills his place. He switches. We still have the same problem. We hold a few soldiers. We give them a military tribunal. I don't know. But what happens is this poison still stays. The curriculum stays. The algorithm stays. The system in which we're poisoning these minds stays. And that can't stay. So we have to start local. It has to be local. You need to do that. You need to go to your school. You need to take your kids out of school. I think I'm talking to a bunch of grandparents at this point. So, might not be the right audience, but, these schools need to be shut down. This poison needs to stop. Anybody that's involved in making these curriculums, these poisonous curriculums, it needs to be found out who did it. They need to be held on trial. They need to be, there has to be justice here. There has to be. Because there is no Tyler Robinson without the poison. I forgot to finish the story about the girlfriend contacting me, But like when she said, I feel for the kid who did it. And I go, I avoided saying I do too, because I didn't, and I know that it's wrong to suddenly shift. It's such a lefty thing to do, to immediately look at the perpetrator as the victim. But I said, we didn't do that. I got poisoned. You got poisoned. We went through the Mormon church. We went through all that stuff, and neither one of us ended up being killers. So fuck him. He made that choice. I'm not trying to relieve him of the responsibility at all, because there are lots of poisoned people that don't do it. But guess what? Those people who cheered, they're just as guilty, because they're just Tyler Robinson without the courage. I hate to say that too, but because, it's so popular to call people cowards for shooting people. And, I don't fall for that. It takes a bit of bravery to do a terrible thing. He put himself at risk. Let's put it that way. I know people are going to hate me for saying that, but the people who cheered, let's just put it this way. The people who cheered, I'll give you that. He's a coward. But the people who cheered for it are even more cowardly by a million degrees. Can we say that? Because they would do it if they could do it, if they weren't so cowardly. They would. They would cheer your death, for sure. I am positive that my siblings, some of them, the liberal ones, the feminists, would be glad that I died. I didn't go to my father's funeral because I knew my sisters were full of shit and they were glad he was dead. My feminist sisters were not at all sad when my dad died. I could see it. I know it because I've heard them talk about him over the years. They've never said a kind word about the man, ever. I never heard either one of my sisters say one single nice thing about my father. And their feminist mother never did either. Not one word of kindness towards him. And they swooped in after the funeral and tried to pretend that, it's like, no. You hated the man. And you hate me. And I know it. They would gladly cheer. So we got to stay away from these people, but we've got to neutralize them. These two women are nurses, okay? These two women, my sisters, are people who are supposed to take care of people, but they have a tremendous hatred towards. Anyway, I'm not going to say. Only they know what's in their hearts. But I can tell you by how I know I've been treated by them. And granted, again, I wasn't the great brother. I hopped up and left. I said, I'm out. I don't know exactly how we get these people back, or if we can get them back at all. But I know we can stop the poison. We can stop the poisoners. We have to. I'm rambling again. I'm being repetitive again. But I could have been Tyler Robinson, and that's more horrifying than I could have been Charlie Kirk. It's more horrifying. The Charlie Kirks are going to be fine. The people inspired by Charlie Kirk, they're going to be fine. They are. They're going to have happy lives. But the people that are inspired by Tyler Robinson and the people who poisoned him, they're going to be miserable. They're going to continue to be more miserable. They're going to get fatter. They're going to get more septum rings. They're going to dye their hair more colors. They're going to get more obese. They're going to get more tattoos. They're going to involve themselves in more and more and more and more self-destruction. I'm a furry. I'm not even human. I'm not human. I'm not white. I'm not male. I'm not female. I'm not a white female. I'm trans. I'm not evil. They're poisoned. That's more horrifying. It is more horrifying. More horrifying than Charlie Kirk taking a bullet in front of his family and friends. And more horrifying than that is the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of children who have been mutilated in their minds, in their souls, and literally, physically in their genitals. Chemically, physically castrated, made into eunuchs, driven crazy, driven to be rabid animals. They've driven them to the point where good people like me and you and Charlie and Charlie's fans almost feel the need to go out and exterminate them. Put them down. We're not going to do that, of course. But that's how people are feeling right now. That's how the level of sickness and poisoning that's happened. This is not a dream, okay? This isn't something you're reading about one of Hitler's doctors or an atrocity that happened in the past. This is ongoing. Children are still mutilating their own genitals. They are still doing it. They're mutilating their own bodies in big and small ways. They're dyeing their hair because they're piercing themselves, because they're chopping off their fingers, because they're chopping off their dicks, because they've been poisoned by the curriculum. And we need to find that curriculum and eradicate it, every single bit of it. And the people that are imposing it, They need to be called to repentance. They need to know whatever we have to do to get it into their minds, to snap them back to reality. We can't get their dicks back. If they chopped them off already, we can't get them back. So there's going to be a lot of anger and a lot of hurt and a lot of pain with that. But we have to fix this. We have to stop it. Because it hasn't stopped yet. These professors, these teachers, these people doing the curriculums, they're still at work. We've started to fire them. I love it. But we have to get to the source. Those books need to be burned. Okay? Yeah, you heard me say it. That curriculum, that evil poison curriculum that is poisoning these kids and turning them into Tyler Robinsons, one shooter after another, those curriculums need to be burned. And the people that made them and designed them need to be held to account, whatever that looks like. Time to stop fucking around. There's no kumbaya here at all. Look, okay, I'll give you your kumbaya. You want to know when you can do your kumbaya? When every one of these people, when every one of these poisoners is taken out of the system and put into a mental hospital or something where they can be managed, and you can have story time there, and you can sit around and sing songs there, and you can sing kumbaya, as long as they're away from children or any levers of power. Get them the fuck away from power. They do not know how to use power. Power to them is death. They will, at the drop of a hat, execute. Just like they executed Charlie, they will execute me. They will execute you. They will execute any person with traditional values that's a white Christian male. They will execute you. Do not think they won't. You know they will. There is no excuse for denial any longer. Anyway, I'm not going to apologize for being out of my mind with rage right now. Thanks for listening. Unnecessary outro song to totally waste more